So good morning, everyone. My name is David Monahan, and I'm the campaign manager at Campaign for a Commercial-Free Childhood, which is located here in Boston. You've heard a lot about us these last 2 days. Joining me today will be Sriram Madhusoodanan from Corporate Accountability. And we have partnered on some important campaigns over the last couple of years, which you'll be hearing a little bit about. But what this session is about is taking, hi Mindy, all the knowledge that you have and all the passion and starting to effectuate change. How dramatic. Effectuate change like starting on Monday morning. And what we're hearing from everyone who's here and excited is that they really care so much about this. And if you think about it, I mean, could it get any bigger? It's like you've been hearing, it's about kids' brains, right? And it's really about, like, the nature of our society is going to be profoundly changed in a detrimental way if we don't do something. So that's why we all want to make a difference. You know, kids are our future, and if they are less empathetic and less engaged with the people around them and their communities, then we're all going to be in trouble. So obviously, there's a certain urgency. But what we're planning is that I'll speak to you a little bit about some ideas that I have about how you effectuate change and some of the challenges. Sriram will do the same. And then we're going to leave a good, hopefully about 25 to 30 minutes to have a discussion. We want to hear from you about challenges that you face. And we don't mean we want you to ask us things that we'll answer. We want to have a discussion about it. So hopefully that will be really fruitful. And the mission statement, I'm not going to dwell too much on the specifics of what CCFC does, because I think you all seem to get it. We're really excited about that. But we educate the public about commercialism's impact on kids' well-being, and we advocate for the end of child-targeted marketing. And as Josh explained yesterday, it's really about the concept that the most important influence in children's lives should not be a corporation or someone who has an ulterior motive. It should be people who have the best interests of your child at heart. And the concept of why we want to protect kids is kind of the same reason that people are targeting them, because they're so vulnerable, they're such an easy mark. Not only are you getting a benefit up front if you can convince them to nag their parents for something, but it pays later, because at such a young age they're forming their likes and dislikes and habits for life. And one of the reasons we focus so much on technology is because not only is it such, it's really the lead way that people are marketing the kids today, but there's also this concept of getting kids so deeply engaged. Jenny Radesky mentioned yesterday about this emotional attachment that kids have. And corporations are saying, that's terrific. Not only is that kid sure to nag their parents, but they're going to market for us. They're going to go on social media or Musical.ly. If you haven't heard of Musical.ly, it's kind of depressing, but check it out. And they're going to be marketing for us. So the reasons that kids are so vulnerable are the reasons that we're concerned. And if I leave that up, you'll probably stare at it, so I'm just going to pass. But basically, this concept that you're telling them that that commercialism is an important value that they should be thinking about when you really want to be instilling in them the concepts of community and being kind and interacting and being empathetic. And there's also, of course, some bad habits that can be encouraged with marketing, like eating junk food or starting to smoke or drink at a young age. There's so many reasons. But what we're going to try to do and encourage is effectuating change. And there's actually an important one that's missing here. And I'm not going to take questions really till the end, but I will ask you if someone can suggest the one that's missing. But effectuating change in people's understanding, so kind of educating them about the issues that concern us. The perceptions, which is often different from what the reality is. Just generally kind of effectuating change in people's habits, and that can be really broad. So whether it's parents and how much they are being engaged with their kids, what the families are doing, and when we're talking about screen time, whether they're monitoring somewhat, whether the kids are caring enough to kind of limit themselves. So many other things like what school districts are doing, how much they're buying in to the whole technology thing. And then a big part of what we do at CCFC relates to corporate practices, trying to enlighten people about how those practices are impacting people, trying to pressure companies to more do the right thing, And we look at a number of ways that their practices will impact children's development, including the issue of data collection and how much kids' privacy is being affected. Can anyone suggest one really big one that's missing from here? Yes, Mandy.
Policy.
Policy, exactly. Thank you. Choose a plan. Policy and law is a big part of what we do, and like a campaign that we recently launched about YouTube and how it's collecting kids' information and violating COPPA. A big piece of that is getting the government involved, getting other policymakers involved to kind of put pressure on the company to do the right thing. Just one second. Of course, this is so analog. I wasn't going to really stare at my computer when I got paper. So one of our questions is how much should you try to get corporations, work with corporations and kind of persuade them to do the right thing? And because some people look at us as like, oh, you're always kind of jabbing at these companies, but do you ever reach out and try to convince them to change? And we think a really big part of that going forward is to get companies more and more to realize, each board member at a company is someone who's part of a family and maybe a parent and should care and lives in the community that is going to be, detrimentally affected if they don't do the right thing. But it seems like the bottom line seems to be what's foremost in their minds. So, right now it doesn't really help. So, for instance, with this YouTube campaign, when Google is denying that YouTube is even a site for kids, what good would it do for us to say, hey, we'd like to sit down and chat with you, Google, about changing your practices? About, well, we don't have kids on YouTube. So that would kind of be a waste of time. But I think long range, that's really important, and it is something that we've done at CCFC. For instance, we worked cooperatively with Panera when they launched this campaign in a number of ways to show that it's a good place, they're a good member of the community, it's a good place for your family to eat, that their foods are clean, and they don't have antibiotics. And one of the components was that they were not going to use gimmicks or distractions or cartoon characters to lure kids. And that's so important because food shouldn't be gamified. And so we were happy to partner with them when they came to us and said, would you be willing to kind of give a thumbs up? And we're like, sure, we don't take corporate donations, but we're happy to give a thumbs up and say if we think a corporation is really doing the right thing. And that was one instance where we did. Talking about some of the challenges of campaigns, and there are many, and that's one of the things I want to ask you folks about. But one of them is, this first one, we've heard a little talk about it. Nancy Carlson-Page mentioned the concept just a few minutes ago. And I've had this on the theater here in Boston. You see people get on and the parent hands the child the device right away. And we try to be so careful in not trying to make parents feel guilty or make them think we're pointing a finger or we're superior. I mean, first of all, it's just not the right thing to do because we know that that's not why it's happening. But it's also not an effective message. No one wants to hear someone pointing a finger and saying you did the wrong thing. They're just not. That's not going to resonate. So that's an important thing that we keep in mind. I'll mention in a bit one of the campaigns where it was really pivotal. Probably one of the hugest issues is the limited resources. Okay, so somebody came to me this morning. Is Amy? There's Amy. Amy gave me this wrapper from Target today. Their new nighttime underwear where they have a picture of a kid holding a screen. No. So what's that all about? So we need to give some thought to that. But we can't really, if you think about it, you probably see things about once a day that make you scratch your head. And we can't go jumping around to do everything because we don't have the resources. Unlike the people that are pushing all this technology, you have to spend money to make money, and they have money, and they spend money, and they make more money. So we have to consider how best to use our resources. And one of the ways that we do that is that we often partner with other groups so we can multiply the message and we can use resources together. And I'll mention in a little bit more about that. But keep in mind that industry doesn't have any limits. They're always pushing the whole perception that technology is good, in addition to saying that they're individual products. are often good. And we have to think about smart ways. And an important part of it, so I mentioned that I had this suggestion, we need to think about what we're going to do, and we need to have a strategy. Where can we have the best impact and be most effective, whether it's affecting that particular practice and or educating people, enlightening people about a wave of new kind of products like, let's say digital soothers that sit in a baby's bedroom, that kind of thing. So we need to kind of be judicious about what we're going to do is an important aspect. And we need to really strategize. We just don't have the luxury of saying, well, let's try this and see if that was effective. No, that wasn't effective. Let's try something else. We absolutely need to strategize and come up with how best we're going to do it and what are our goals and how it's going to be effective. So one of the biggest ones is this perception challenge. And so if you think about technology, there's this whole perception of, it's cool, right? Kids deserve the best. Don't you want what's best for your child? Don't you want to give them these tools? This concept that today's kids will live, in an AI world, they'll live in a tech world, so you have to prepare them at an early age. And someone mentioned yesterday that the devices they're working on today in first grade will probably be obsolete by the time they're in fifth grade, but we all know the reasons that that's not really effective. And then this concept, just advancement, we have to advance. And the gentleman from Virginia mentioned yesterday, I think, the concept of a resistor. Or was it Richard? Someone mentioned.
It was the Virginia guy.
It was the Virginia guy.
Yeah.
This resistor. So here's the terms that we always hear. Are you a Luddite? And if you want to know more about the term Luddite, Josh will explain to you. It wasn't really meant to be that bad. There's a lot of good things about being a Luddite. But,
take back that term. I'd like to sign up for your newsletter.
We'll get a tablet out and we'll chisel it for you. This concept of the nanny state. Let people do what they want to do. Why are you interfering with people? Every time a new product comes out, so all the press about it is good because the people not only came up with the product, but they came up with the whole PR campaign. They've got all this money at their disposal, but when you try to say, well, we should have some limits, and where would we be without the protections that prevent kids from purchasing cigarettes or from having advertising directed at kids? Of course those things work and they're important, but this concept, you don't want a nanny state. And of course, are you against advancement? It's just so, So here's an example of a campaign where we had to really change people's perceptions about technology. So Hello Barbie was this this AI internet-connected doll. You press the button, your child was supposed to speak. I see the faces being made. The child is supposed to be best friends with Barbie and share all their secrets. And meantime, all the information is being collected by Mattel, sent out over the internet, stored, analyzed, they'll target marketing to the child. And this was the cover of the New York Times Magazine because, as they admitted later in the press, Mattel had this whole system for getting the word out about how great Barbie would be. And there was an article in the Times Magazine that had a little bit of questioning about the technology, but they were gushing about how exciting it was going to be. So one of the first things we had to do was figure out how would we take this on, how would we change the perception, how would we get people to understand some of the dangers of it. And we actually got a number of experts on board to talk about the impacts that children should not have these faux relationships with a doll, that it was wrong to get kids to share their intimate details of their lives, that you should be engaging in creative play, obviously not play that's scripted by a doll. So we had a petition, 30,000 people signed it, and eventually we knew that we had been successful in changing the perception when the day came that you would Google Hello Barbie, and the third item would be us. Hell no Barbie. Hello Barbie on the shelf. And in fact, what was even better than that was when the Smithsonian eventually came out with an article on the science of creepiness. And this is actually the first paragraph of the article. That the typical example of creepiness is Hello Barbie with embedded Wi-Fi and Siri-like capabilities. But we were successful in changing the perception. That doll became a dud, and it really opened people's eyes, and I think we stopped a little bit of the floodgate of everyone saying, oh, this is the next big thing. Some concepts about partnerships. You know, some obvious benefits. You're pooling resources and time, so you know you're working together. Maybe you know, in part of the like the strategy and the planning. If you have 2 or more groups coming up with ideas, I talked about how the strategy is so important. Well, if you were putting your heads together and maybe having different perspectives, like the members of the supporters of Sriram's group are so concerned about corporate misdeeds, which is something that a lot of our people care about. And there's an intersection, but there's some unique things that they have and that are different from our group. We partner with privacy groups, we partner with environmental groups. So having the perspective, which kind of gives a broader pen, can really be super helpful. We can get the message out to each of our groups, which means just more people, and again, more people that have different kind of perspective. You might have special skills, like there's a group that we work with a bit, Story of Stuff, which is in California, is it? And they are great at videos, and they just have the ability to put together a 60-second video that's really persuasive, and we don't have that capability, so that's something that's helpful when you work with a group like that. And then also when you really want to broaden things, when you do want to get legislators involved or you want to get community groups involved, the more groups you have, the more likely someone will have a connection, or you can reach out to the press and say, oh, I know somebody at the Washington Post. So here's just an example of our recent YouTube complaint. There are 23 groups, and some of the people that are here this weekend, I think, are among the groups. But these are people that represent large constituencies that all sign on to the complaint that we sent. Last thing I'll leave you with is a little bit of discussion about Aristotle, and a few people have been kind enough to come up to me in the last 2 days to say, thank you for what you did about Aristotle, because that really turned my stomach. So Aristotle was supposed to be, from Mattel, an internet-connected nanny that sits in the child's bedroom. Why they thought, I'm surprised they didn't make it a little teddy bear. They decided to make it a little device out of a science fiction movie. But that's supposed to sit there, lull your child to sleep, plays lullabies, plays videos, colors on the wall. If the child is crying in the night, guess what? You don't have to leave your Netflix. You'll get a little beep. They'll say, oh, #1, child just cried, #1. You go, oh yeah, good. I don't care, that was just #1 crying time. Go back to the movie. And then you can decide, like, you want it on 2 or 3 times where you get the full alarm. Oh, I better go in and check. The kid doesn't stop crying. And so this is another one where we had to change perceptions, and we had to actually bring a lot of these concepts. So we wanted to partner with people, and we partnered with this group Story of Stuff that I mentioned. We partnered with experts who were willing to speak out about why this is wrong. We really had to strategize about you know, what steps we were going to take and what we envisioned, you know, success to look like. We eventually launched this campaign where we just talked about all of those pieces. Again, so I forgot to mention, this doll was also supposed to be a friend. So this is like a multi-purpose, it's like the Swiss Army knife of AI devices. Because it starts out lulling your child to sleep, but as soon as your child is old enough to talk, they're supposed to talk to this thing as a friend, and they're supposed to tell their secrets, and then they can have stories and fairy tales. That's another thing. You don't read to the child, the device reads books to your child. So we had experts talk about all of those different reasons that the device is harmful. And, really important, we didn't accuse parents. We made sure our tone, and I'm not going to say, oh, this just comes naturally. I mean, we check with people, like, did we miss anything about how we were saying this? Would this make you offended if you were a parent? And we had to tweak things to make sure that parents knew. We understand why you're looking for every advantage. We understand that you're juggling so much in the home, and you want to do what's best for your child. So we found just the right way, we thought, to say, yeah, we understand what you're looking for, but you should probably rethink this one. It's not a good idea. And we were very successful. This is where the New York Times reported that before it even hit the market, they had actually canceled the device, and we were really, really pleased about that. And it shows, you know, this one was important, but also getting the message out, getting the message to companies. You know, before you come out with another one of these devices, you should really give some thought to it. I'll close by saying, and then I'll take if there's a question or two. I really encourage everyone just to really believe that you can make a difference. Okay, so if your job enables you to make a difference in some way, believe that you or your organization can do it. If you're not in a job where you feel like you can make a difference every day, then you can still support groups who do, look for opportunities to partner with them, or also think about the ways you can do it in your everyday life. Sarah Michelson was mentioning how her group has this handout about the restaurants in Atlanta that are screen-free. Now I think they need to update it. I think she was talking about, you go in and there's a big thing on the bar. Well, what I'm seeing now is even the screen on the table, to lure the kids to play games and to buy stuff. So that's one example where, to me, you can try to make change in your world, right? So again, we don't want to be negative or harping, but you can really politely explain to the manager, you know what, this restaurant doesn't meet my needs anymore, because if I want to bring my child, I don't want my child on the device. Or even if you don't have a child, just say, I don't really support what you're doing here, so I'm not really going to patronize you. So you can mention it to the manager, you can go home and email the corporate people about it, and that's a way how you can, try to make some change in your own, little world, and really believe that you can make a difference. Okay, so any questions before I throw it over to Sriram? Yes, Doug?
So on your first slide, you said policy is missing.
Yeah.
And
which was just a timing issue, though, because I didn't get it to people in time.
well, I actually, yeah, okay. So you weren't trying to say that policy, you don't engage in policy.
We absolutely engage in policy.
Okay,
yeah.
Because one of the things I've noticed is many groups, not CCFC, but have a very limited view of what policy means. And they immediately assume it must mean legislation. And there are so many more ways to affect change through a policy. So Panera, child-friendly meals or whatever, I forget what they were calling it, but that's a policy. And that's a policy change. And those are, any of these things at a corporation. I've been pushing with no success for the American Medical Association to make sure that in pediatrics rotations, every new MD gets 4 hours of training on media's effects. That would be a policy change. Most of the policy changes that we can actually affect don't require legislation. But we've gotten very much hooked into this idea that you have to go through legislation, it's not that that's not a fair way to go too, but we've really limited our imagination where we can make a difference.
You're absolutely right, and another great example is with school districts. So if this bill passes in Maryland, as we expect the governor to sign it any day now, you all can go to your school district the next day and say, hey, can we start putting this into effect here? You don't need to wait for a law to do that, and it's just common sense, and it's really, you have a really good chance, I think, at a victory on that, because it's not saying, unplug all the devices, it's not saying throw them out of school, it's just saying, can't we have some common sense limits that take into account their impact? That's a great point. Anyone else before I throw it over to Sriram? Yes.
I just want to say that one place where policy change really could make a difference is childcare regulation. We had a really bad experience in our state with that, and then trying to think about how to organize an advocacy effort to change that. That's a state-by-state policy, but childcare providers and people in early childhood are asked for input and can influence that kind of policy change.
Right. A woman that I know from the dog park actually works for the Y, like the regional Y, and she talks about how the kids after school, they'll see all these movies. Some of them are like inappropriate, age inappropriate, and she wasn't really happy about. And I'm like, that's something that is really of concern. You're not seeing that in school, but then you go to the after-school program and you're seeing it. I'll take one more.
I'm a pastor, and so what are you doing, what is CCFC doing to reach out to faith-based communities?
The first thing I'm doing is handing you my business card. We've chatted a little bit. But in all seriousness, we have already identified in the last couple of days, as we're looking at the demographics, this network, the Screen Time Action Network, is very new. And we're excited about how it's grown in the first year, but we've already identified that we need to make more of an effort to reach out to faith-based communities. We feel like there's a really natural intersection there. So not only do I want to reach out to you because you can kind of be a partner, hopefully, and get the message, but if you have any input or suggestions as to how we can do that more broadly, we'd love to hear. Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone. I'm going to throw it over to Sriram and we'll definitely chat more.
Hi everyone, Sriram Madhusoodanan. I'm with Corporate Accountability. As David mentioned, I am the Deputy Campaigns Director there. So first of all, actually, before I start, I just want to acknowledge and say it's really exciting to be in this room. You know, CCFC and I, David, Josh, we've worked together for a while. In fact, really when we launched our food campaign, which I'll talk about in a second, CCFC was one of the first groups that we went to really deepen and understand our learning of marketing from corporations to children, and just how deep and often insidious that is. And with the issue of screen time and children's screen time, I was able to catch a little bit of Nancy Carlson-Page's keynote this morning. I mean, it's just this is just such a critical issue. And this is not an issue that corporate accountability really works on, but I'm so glad that CCFC and all of you are out there ensuring that we are holding corporations' feet to the fire when it comes to these kinds of marketing practices, because as we can see, really the science is just starting to catch up to what the impacts of long-term exposure to screen time are, especially among children. So I'm really excited to see this network come together, and just looking at some of the examples that David pulled forward, I was reminded of how CCFC, you guys have really, I mean, I think props go to you, like you've had an incredibly outsized impact with really a small network of groups, and I think you all in this room coming together is part of how that work gets amplified. So corporate accountability, I don't know why I'm actually looking here, I don't have it.
It's a screen.
Exactly. There it is. We're all trying to do better. We're all trying to do better. So, corporate accountability, our mission is to stop transnational corporations from devastating democracy, trampling human rights, and destroying our planet. Thank you. So just a little bit about our history. We were launched in the late 70s with the Nestle boycott. Is anyone familiar with that? Right on. So part of that, we've been challenging the abusive marketing practices of global corporations from our very beginning. But for folks who aren't familiar, at the time Nestle was engaged in infant formula marketing, particularly in the global south, that was really targeting and exploiting especially low-income communities, especially mothers there. It was really, really devastating. It was driving more than 1 million infant deaths at the time. And this was formed, our boycott really at the time, was formed from just the powerful idea that people-powered movements could control and contend with the power of global corporations, and was really at that moment too inspired by the successes and victories of movements led by people of color, like the Montgomery bus boycott or the farm worker strikes and brave boycotts in Cesar Chavez at that point in time. So the boycott of Nestle around its infant formula marketing practices really grew to become the first successful boycott, international boycott of a global corporation. And we've grown from those roots today to running high-powered campaigns in 4 key areas: climate change, food, water, and tobacco. And I would really think of our role in the movement. We look out at an industry that's engaged in harmful practices, and we identify an industry leader that is perhaps having the most outsized role in driving those practices. So Nestle at that point in time was one of the most abusive and powerful. The rest of the players in the infant formula marketing industry were really following their practices. We choose those corporate targets, and we campaign over years really to bring them into line with what people are demanding, because at the core of it, you know, everything that we're standing for in this room are things that people collectively share, right? Community, the right to a childhood that's not interfered by corporations that are really seeking profit, often at any cost. And so in this way, shifting these institutional practices has been our bread and butter. And our food campaign, which I work on, really was informed a lot by our tobacco campaign, but we launched it in 2009. And really major concern was how we were seeing increasingly an epidemic of diet-related diseases that were increasingly impacting children at younger and younger ages. And for example, just one very small example of this is the fact that decades ago, even when some pediatric endocrinologists we spoke with were training, they were trained to identify what's now called type 2 diabetes primarily in adults. It was called adult onset diabetes, and they've actually had to change the name because it's increasingly showing up in children. And our food campaigns focused when we looked at, for example, the industry and who was targeting children, how they were targeting children, and who was even spending the most money in doing that. We really honed in on the fast food industry and McDonald's in particular, which for a whole set of practices, whether you look at Ronald McDonald, toys and Happy Meals, or even its marketing in schools, has really been, in not a positive way, but the industry leader in targeting children at younger and younger ages. And just as a couple personal stories here, I remember myself when I was 5 years old, and my family, we lived in England at the time, but I remember being brought by my parents to McDonald's for the first time and being introduced to a Happy Meal, and how at that time there was a Disney movie, The Jungle Book, that was in theaters, and how the toys were from The Jungle Book. And I remember being like, oh my god, this is the greatest thing ever. And going back and playing with this toy. It was like a little thing of Mowgli in a barrel, and even cutting out the bits from the box and playing with that over and over. But right, just that experience shows you how these products are designed to really make that connection, and ultimately with how the food is also really designed ultimately to be addictive, to be high in the fat, salt, and sugar that we know our bodies are so craving, create those connections and those brand loyalties that ultimately shift eating habits, starting with children over a lifetime. And that was, for us, one of the really concerning things that drew us to this campaign and needing to change the practices of McDonald's in particular. And I'll also say on this, increasingly fast food corporations like McDonald's have been really growing incredibly into the digital sphere, using so many forms of digital marketing in order to target children. One example recently was how we somehow, this is actually with CCFC, we had come across the fact that Pokemon Go, if you remember when this was launched, at first in Japan, I think it was Gizmodo or one of those outlets that's like really into looking at the code behind these things, was like so excited about augmented reality, and then somehow in the code of it itself, McDonald's was actually there. And it was revealed that McDonald's was actually having a promotion where, as part of this game, you could go into McDonald's and you could battle other people who were playing it. It was a form of turning the corporation itself and its stores into a really kind of insidious form of marketing through this advert game itself. And actually, we raised some heck about it. We launched a petition with CCFC. Actually, you guys took the lead on that one, I believe. Ultimately, when it was coming to the US, McDonald's partnership was no longer there, which is huge, that kind of public visibility and challenge could stop a burgeoning partnership that would have really changed the landscape and how kids are marketed to by this corporation. But so I'm going to share just a few key principles from our campaigns, especially our food campaign, that I think are applicable, and I think about in terms of how we approach changing corporate practices and shifting the dial. But really, our role within the movement is often to shift that public perception so we can create the space for really public policy as a whole to move forward. We saw this with the tobacco industry, for example, in the late 90s and early 2000s, when the extent to which the tobacco industry really knew that their products, that cigarettes were as addictive, and how long they knew about that and actively worked to deny or suppress progress was so essential, and ultimately, for example, launching the Master Settlement Agreement and many, many more movements of public policy at many levels from institutional practices to schools and to local policies that ultimately shifted the dial. And so, today when I board an airplane, there isn't a smoking section and a non-smoking section anymore. It's just a non-smoking section. So we can make this change, and public health movements have shown that in the past. So coming back to my 3 key principles, I think the first thing I'll say is to act local, but think global, right? Connect it to the global still. So one example is the story of how we worked and were able to successfully pass a policy in the Los Angeles Unified School District with CCFC to stop McTeachers Nights. So just a show of hands here, who here is familiar with McTeachers Nights or have heard of them? Cool. Yeah. So I'm wondering if someone else maybe can explain what they are real quick. Yeah.
It's a fundraiser for the school, and teachers work at McDonald's for that certain night. So all the kids come with their families to McDonald's, and the teachers volunteer their time and are serving the food to the kids.
Wow.
And the schools get like a very tiny bit of money.
Very small. Yeah, yeah. I mean, from some of the research that CCFC had actually led on, it's about less than $1 or less than that per student. I mean, it's so small. And it's actually engineered to happen on nights that the stores aren't really visited very much by people. So it's perfect profit margins for the franchisees or for the corporate entities. They're essentially getting free labor. But so it's just horrible. It's super insidious form of marketing, and it's exploiting that trust and relationship between trusted institutions and children to market the brand. So in some way, you have to hand it to them. It's pretty ingenious, but not in a good way. So we had launched this call with educators from across the country and with CCFC a few years back. And building on that, we actually saw an opportunity in the city of Los Angeles to pass a policy. So we had one of our organizers. There was actually a policy that was already on the books. So actually, Doug, going to your point about policy doesn't always mean new legislation, that's absolutely true. There were sponsorship guidelines that were already passed by the city of Los Angeles, or the LA Unified School District, I should say, that said, there should not be sponsorship with any corporations that are profiting off of a whole set of things, but, selling of unhealthy foods, high in fat, salt, and sugar was exactly one of those. And one of our organizers on the ground met with the chair of the school board. He was actually someone who had taken on school food issues as a personal cause, had taken on and championed this issue, and was basically saying, absolutely, that's absolutely ridiculous that this is happening. We worked with them to introduce a resolution. It passed almost unanimously through the school district, and then because we knew that this was also connected to a global movement, or really a national movement of educators that were calling on McDonald's to stop this practice, we were able to not just generate some visibility through the media in Los Angeles, but also connect with national reporters like at USA Today that helped make this a national issue. And one really fun thing, and David was there for some of these calls afterwards, was that when we came back a few months later at the McDonald's annual shareholders meeting, which we attend every year to continue our engagement. It's not always friendly, but there is engagement with the corporation. I should say it's friendly. It's not. We don't always see eye to eye. Let's say we're very polite. But when we were at the shareholders meeting and asking representatives of McDonald's, well, so Los Angeles Unified School District, the second largest school district in the country, has passed this policy. What are your plans? How do you intend to respond? They really had no answer. They're like, well, I'm sure we'll, I don't know, maybe comply. But there really was not an answer to a very simple question of well, this is passed a policy. What are you going to do now? Are you going to respect the wishes of the people in the school district? So that kind of story of acting local, but as you all here are part of a broader movement, connecting it to the fact that every single one of these victories is another victory for a broader movement that is demanding a reduction in screen time, that is demanding a right to childhood, which is also a right that the UN has recognized. Secondly, the lesson or kind of takeaway I want to share with you is who's conveying the message. Right? We think about this a lot because we're a membership-based organization. There's power in representing people. We also don't take funding from corporations so that we can really stay true to what people are demanding. But at the same time, we have to be mindful of who is conveying the message, because with these demands, when you are raising them out there and you're fighting a perception like the tech companies have of being great and giving you tech, and that's great, you do also have to think about, well, who has power and presence and can influence more people to get behind us. So one of the examples early on from our launch of the campaign challenging McDonald's was really seeing that health professionals were a really powerful envoy and spokesperson. We saw that not only that, but McDonald's had really worked for decades to try and silence any kind of pushback or any kind of speaking out from health professionals across the board. Sponsorship agreements with the American Academy of Family Physicians, or the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Association of Nutrition and Dietetics, not just with McDonald's but across the industry, were quite common. That's changing now. But so one of the things that we did was really organize a broad open letter from 550 health professionals across all 50 states, health professionals and institutions, especially really looking at folks who are experts on pediatrics, who were health professionals or working in clinics themselves and saw children coming in week after week being affected by diet-related disease at younger and younger ages. And then the day before the McDonald's shareholders meeting, we launched that letter with full-page ads in multiple newspapers and local press conferences, having some of these very health professionals who had signed on to this letter there to speak to this issue and coming into McDonald's meeting. And it generated incredible media visibility, from the Associated Press to Wall Street Journal. I mean, within actually a couple, we included a link to the letter so more health professionals could join to continue to grow the movement. And actually within a month, it had grown from 550 to more than 1,600 health professionals now across the world, and generated thousands of stories in media outlets around the world that really put this issue on the map and really started to change people's perceptions of McDonald's from just like a family-friendly brand, we're just, doing what people want, to like, oh, well, actually what they're doing here is targeting the basic vulnerabilities of children, and health professionals are saying so, right? So this is a valued and powerful voice that we trust. It's an authoritative voice on children's health. And since then, it not only a few months later moved McDonald's ultimately to make changes in its Happy Meals that were reducing the portion of fries at first and adding in apples, and they've continued some of those changes, but also created fast food industry-wide shifts like Jack in the Box, which is a regional chain in California, dropped toys from its kids' meals entirely. Even with the pressure since then, more have joined it, and you saw also the impact of the announcement from Panera, which is even more pressure and continuing to isolate what is really an industry leader in terms of who's doing the worst practices when it comes to marketing to children. The third point that I'm going to leave, and I think this echoes something that David had said, right, is that you really have the power. You're all connected to people in your own local communities. There are so many tools that you can use to bring these issues forward. And I think being in connection and community here, having a community of practice that's learning, okay, what's resonating in communities and how can we build and take those lessons and build and get bigger together is really, really critical. One of the things that we always try and think about as we're leading actions or designing actions is how can we grow this? Because at the end of the day, corporate accountability by ourselves, we're not by ourselves, like all of our staff in our office, even though we work really hard, we're not going to stop McDonald's from marketing children. And the Nestle boycott, successful campaigns like that, we're not just a handful of staff working to do this. It was bringing more and more people in, and so giving people the tools. I mean, I still talk to some of our members on the phone, or meet folks like you, or people on the street who was like, oh yeah, I remember the Nestle boycott. I was a Nestle boycotter back in the day. I'm actually still boycotting Nestle because of many other practices that are messed up that they're still engaged in. But so I think, again, don't underestimate the power that we have. I think so often global corporations are very much trying to convince us that we are alone, we are consumers, we don't have this power, but really our power lies in each other and in community. And so I think that is something that gives me hope and resilience, and even just seeing all of you here in the room today caring about the issues of children's screen time. Even actually, I was in an Uber on the way here. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, but I know. But I was talking with the driver about the fact that I was coming to a Children's Screen Time Action Network conference, and he's like, "Oh my God, that is such an important issue. I'm so concerned about that myself." So I think you are really the tip of the iceberg here on a broader issue that has deep societal import. So I think I'm going to wrap up there.
Any questions for Sriram before we get a dialogue going? Yes, Roxana.
So this is so exciting. I wanted to, first of all, thank you so much. 2 comments. One is Privacy International has an excellent video on data exploitation. There's a part near the end of it that talks about the impacts on children. I recommend connecting with them. David, one of the things that you mentioned was that the pushback often comes with this language of, oh, do we want to now be the nanny state?
Right.
I think that is an attack on women. And I think that we need to shift the frame to be proud of, a nanny state. And I was thinking back about hashtag nanny state says hashtag me too to corporate power.
Oh,
And
I
so I do think that because we have to say that we are protecting children. We want to stop child exploitation. We want to stop data exploitation because that is really the end game. Data is the new oil. Data is information, the information age. And there's a lot of pulling of data, and so if we want to have the opportunity for consent and to be able to say no, this is one way of, I think, shifting the frame.
Great.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I had a nice conversation with Roxana before this session. Sorry. My name is Seth Evans. I'm a 4th grade teacher, a member of the MTA. And in all the discussions about allies and natural allies and how to scale up and how to affect policy, I haven't heard once in any of the presentations, as wonderful as they've been, never heard once talking about teachers' unions as natural allies here. And we are the largest unions in the country, and we are absolutely natural allies here. If you talk to any teacher about the effects of the electronic culture on their students' learning and ability to pay attention, they will all agree that it is driving them crazy. And they all see the connection. If you talk to administrators, there's this fear about being left behind, about the next town introducing the latest gadgets. And they've already made huge investments, all the districts, in the gadgets. And so they're not really willing to kind of listen to anybody saying that was a bad investment. But teachers are powerful voices. We've seen it in the last couple of weeks in Arizona and Colorado. Oklahoma and West Virginia and Kentucky, and we have a great interest in this cause as well because this is all part of a corporate campaign, essentially, to bring computers into the classrooms and replace teachers with screens. If you look at all the money that's being invested into bringing digital technology into the classrooms, and you look at the forces behind it, these are extremely powerful forces. And I'm afraid that we're just playing whack-a-mole, honestly, by attacking their latest assault on childhood. This is a moment in time with Mark Zuckerberg on national television, with the skepticism that people are now beginning to look at the tech industry with. This is a time that we can take them to task. But I do believe that policy happens at many different levels. But I also believe that we need to get to scale quickly. And that we need to I'm just learning about the campaign in Maryland. We need to take models like that and try to scale that up quickly. And we do have natural allies. And I think if we can get people together from the largest unions in the country as well as all the professional associations, we can make a difference. But I think carpe diem, the time to act is now.
So that's a great point. Thank you. And, we are absolutely going to be looking for ways that on the tech issue we can be partnering more with teachers unions. We're proud to say that with the Make Teachers Nights campaign, the teachers unions were an absolute foundation of that work with the National Education Association. We work closely with the local unions, and that was an important part of getting the message out. You know, so much of what we do, as Sriram said, is giving voice to these different communities, whether it's the members of each of our groups signing petitions or whether it's influential teachers unions. And you know, we look for opportunities. We have a toolkit, the digital parent toolkit for student privacy, that we have aimed at teachers and at school districts and at parents to look for opportunities to see how ed tech is affecting the privacy of students. But thank you for pointing that out. I wanted to mention one other thing about the challenges that I neglected to mention. When you're trying to change the perception and you're working with the press that already has a press packet, so I mentioned about the PR machine. So if a new product or service comes out and all the press knows about it is what they got in a press packet from the company that's trying to make money, and it's incumbent upon them to do the research. So when I showed you the Google search that shows that we're now #3, we like that because it kind of demonstrates, it's emblematic that we're changing the perception, but we also like it because if somebody's going to do a story about it, like with McTeachers Nights, every day there's a new fluff piece from someplace out in the country that says, hey, McTeachers Nights next Thursday, and it's a great, and they're reading off the press release, it's a great opportunity for community and getting together, raising money for the schools. We're like, why didn't you at least Google and see how bad McTeachers Nights, you know? Now, the press does a great job, so like the YouTube campaign, there were some great articles. But it's really incumbent upon us to build the relationships with the reporters that care, the reporters that are going to take the time. But let's look at the reality here, right? So if you think the first two publications that come to our mind, if we want to really get the word out, New York Times and the Washington Post. So the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, who's Amazon. They're not really anti-tech. And then the New York Times, well, like, who's probably their #1 advertiser is Google. So remember that this is a little bit of the challenge, but if you find the right reporters, they'll often do the right job to get the word out.
I'm going to jump in because this is a question that I had for you and also a little bit of a comment.
And can you introduce yourself? I'm sorry, can we follow Seth's lead and everybody?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Mindy Hallahan. I'm here from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Frontline state, home of Betsy DeVos. And many wonderful things. But we also are having major issues with Nestle right now in our groundwater and Flint, as you know. So we've got, I feel like it's very frontline moment for us. I first came across the Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood 10 years ago when there was a front page article in the Grand Rapids Press, my local paper, about bus radio. And Josh was quoted in it. It was this article chronicling that the school districts were taking this on and how many had signed up for it. It was a free radio that they would, programming, they would give the buses all this technology.
The school
and then
bus.
the school buses are public school resources to pump, you know, music, which they said, oh, it's so great for kids. They love it on the way to school and the way home. But of course, with advertising. And I'm reading this article, and getting sicker and sicker to my stomach. And then there's a mention of the counter perspective. And that was how I was turned on to the CCFC. That was 10 years ago. Since that time, my local paper, which used to be very robust and have a very big office that I knew people who worked in, has disappeared. It used to be a paper hardy, and now it's like this big. And we have a state-owned conglomerate for our news. And when in the earlier days, as I was learning to be an activist, and CCFC was very formative for me, I was having success. I was writing letters to the editor, I was getting groups, we were organizing. And it's been really hard as that local space for conversation and engagement. I mean, I don't go to my local media anymore because a lot of it's outsourced anyway, and if I want some harder reporting, it's tricky. So I guess that's a question I have for the group in terms of so many of the platforms themselves are corporatized, so like I've chosen to never be on Facebook, a decision which I'm trying not to gloat about lately. But, you know, so I feel marginalized. I struggle with how to engage because of the shifting media landscape and feeling more fragmented, even though I know people, there's more attention being given and more people are paying attention, but I still feel fragmented. So I wonder if anybody has anything to add.
I'd love to address that. My name is Emily Churkin. I'm from Seattle. I've been a teacher, I'm a mom, and I'm launching an independent consulting business to help families and schools manage screen time and how to help parents talk to schools and how to help schools talk to parents, because I think there's this disconnect and stress everywhere. And one of the questions I wrote down, then you just sort of touched on this idea of information, and there's this paradox, right? Because we all, many of us use social media as a way of gathering the information that we then use and bring back to our communities. I often use it as a tool, like there are certain sites that I recommend, including CCFC, to my parent communities as a resource because it's great. And I even, in my talks, talk about I'm pro-tech positive is the phrase I use, because I do see that there are benefits as a tool when other things have fallen into place. Of course, there's this irony, right, because how do we generate information and support in communities without relying on what has become a way of generating support in communities via social media and not just Facebook, but Twitter or whatever other forms there are. And so I was even just writing this down, like, is this bad, right? Are we being hypocrites when we use social media as a way of connecting with people? Or are we living in the moment, because that is the way in which people connect? And we can talk about, you know, what's news, what's true, what's fact, all of those problems that come up for us as parents and teachers. But I think about it in just how do we address that paradox, right? Because I have used Facebook and left Facebook for a variety of reasons, and yet I find that there are still tools I get from that experience. And I think about the young people, and the example I often give in my talks is the way in which young people come together around gun violence, and the way in which they've been connecting to kids around the country that historically would have taken a lot more effort in a totally different way. So I think there's this guilt of me as a user of social media, and yet also a recognition that I don't know that I could do what I want to do without it. So maybe you can address that, I don't know, just to build on what you were saying.
I mean, if you think of all the different causes where that's going to be a question in the years ahead, you know, whether it's voter registration or district, you know, election districts, gun violence, I mean, we're all going to be having, you know, taking on that challenge. So maybe that's one of the beginnings of the answer, is that we all need to kind of check in with one another for who has ideas, and maybe the next Zuckerberg, who really wants to change the world and doesn't want to make billions, is coming up with some idea where we can all be connected without there being the targeted advertising and everything. Yes?
Hi, I'm Katie, and actually I'll be giving a talk at 1:45 with Government Hall about tech access in minority and low-income communities. But full disclosure here, I'm probably considered one of the bad guys. I'm a technologist, I've been a web developer, but I hear what you're saying about social media, and I would actually say to this, something I was going to talk about later a little bit too, it's about appropriate use, right? So, but it is incumbent upon, see, we can take these products, but I don't think it's incumbent upon these corporations to dictate what appropriate use is. Yes. We need to determine what the appropriate use is in our classrooms and our communities. I think that's probably, one of the maybe guidelines that you could start from when folks are trying to determine, you know, am I being exploited or am I exploiting when I'm using these different communications channels? I think that might be a good place to start. And it's something that I use because I also do a lot of political stuff. Meanwhile, but I think that's kind of like the basis of it. And I think if we go from there and we push back on some of these companies, like, but this is an extraordinary time. We've been seeing people raise their voices about, you know, claiming their data and claiming their privacy, but keeping these companies accountable, making sure that they adhere to the guidelines that users dictate, but also just making sure that we are taking these tools and we are defining the use of these tools and how we want to communicate with our communities. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just say, at CCFC, we have really been struggling with the Facebook question. We have a Facebook community. We have been going hard after Facebook, and I think one of the most troubling things about Facebook is we don't know how the algorithm works. Nobody knows how the algorithm works. But we are told if we want people to see our stuff that's really important, that we want them to see when we post on Facebook, that we have to post regularly on Facebook, or that algorithm will punish us. So that in order to get our really important stuff out there, we have to be posting stuff that maybe doesn't rise to the level of wanting to get people looking at Facebook. So we have to participate in that in order to. So one of the things I think we need to do is, if we are going to be on these platforms, we need to push these platforms. We need to push Facebook to make that algorithm less opaque. We need to push them to say, you know what, we shouldn't have to post several times a day in order for people to see something when we have something really important to say. And that's part of it.
I want to shift gears for just a second. I just want to comment, because a lot of people are talking about, and the whole workshop in a sense is talking about constituencies, natural partners, who do we want to educate, etc. And the piece that throughout this conference I have felt is a little bit missing is children. That children are also a constituency and a natural partner. And for example, I teach workshops to parents and to schools about teaching media literacy to children starting at 2. And people don't know how to do that. And they think, oh, well, how would you teach media literacy? You don't sit down with a 2-year-old and talk to them about corporate advertising. Of course you don't, right? There are ways and there are things that you can say that are perfectly developmentally appropriate and that are playful and that are all of different things at 2 and 3 and 4 that set up a new generation to be skeptical of all of these tricks, of all this trickery that exists in our culture. I did this with my own child. I teach other people to do it. At least, extraordinarily anecdotal data, but what my observation is that some children who have really been exposed to this stuff really are very skeptical, and they see through all of this stuff, and yet we're not putting enough energy, I think, into having workshops and having things for parents and for teachers that teach children very, very early in small little ways to be skeptical of this kind of marketing effort, so that we can theoretically raise a generation that does not have to do this, right? That already sees through it, right, from the start.
That's a perfect example. So what can you start doing on Monday morning? You can start going out and advocating for things like that, or if you are a teacher, you can start doing it. Parents are going to love to see that, because so many parents are going to be like, thank you, thank you, thank you. We're having all these arguments over screen time in the house, and you motivated my child in a way that really illustrated it for it.
And it's totally well received by parents. It's not threatening at all to parents to help them say, like when the kids are watching, presuming that some kids are watching TV or see ads on the sides of buses or whatever, things that are so simple, like did you know that food isn't even real, right? Like, isn't that strange? Like the picture, they don't even use real food to make that. Isn't that so funny, right? There's little things you can say, and parents are not at all, don't in any way object to saying things like that, and they're setting their kids up to be critical consumers.
Yes.
So we just launched locally in Concord, right outside of Boston. We coined it Concord Promise, and we started as just
Who's we?
My name's Adrienne Principe, so just a few moms. So we just got together around this issue and decided we wanted to do something about it. So we launched this Concord Promise, and it started as just an organization urging parents to delay, but we wanted to create support around the parents. So that's kind of like our tangible thing. And then our real focus is supporting parents, educating parents, and partnering. Because to your point and what you guys are talking about is that I think it's really important to bring professionals who know what they're talking about into our communities. So starting locally and thinking globally and connecting parents. So we had an event. Sharon Maxwell spoke. She was amazing. We had we had a parent, a teacher, and we had a lot of parents come. We're going to hold an event in the fall, so I'm going to call you with the kids. You live in Concord?
No, I live
in Weston. So we want to bring all the kids whose parents have signed the promise. We have like over 200, I think there's 250 kids, and bring the kids and say like, these are all the kids that have signed the promise, and hey, there's my friend, and they're not going to get a smartphone, and then bring somebody in to talk to the kids, because that education piece is so important. And we're really feeling like our model, and maybe I don't know, I might see like pies in the sky, but can this model be duplicated in communities all across the country? Because I think it really does start locally, and the education piece is so important. And we follow CCFC and Common Sense Media and all these other organizations, but it's really hard to get your information from a national organization. It's much easier to talk with your friends and to parent in the moment with the people who are around you. So how do we bring this down to the local level? And
well, I mentioned, I think, you know, I mentioned the toolkit that we have offered to give people the resources on student privacy. I think one of the things we would really give some thought to is how can we provide resources? And if you look at the Screen Time Action Network page, I'm sure a lot of you know, we have a lot of resources on there. But the concept of like a package of what can you do in your school tomorrow to reach out to kids is a really good idea. Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. What a gentleman.
I would like to echo both of you. So I work for Boys and Girls Clubs of Boston, and I would say, like, in an official way, I'm very new to this movement. But in concept, I didn't have a TV for most of my adult life. If I didn't have a husband, I wouldn't have one now. This conference has been amazing, but it's been so much, and there are so many elements to this issue. There's the corporate side, there's the marketing side, there's education for parents, there's social, emotional, academic impacts on our kids, and it's huge. And I just, in terms of Monday, like, I don't even know where to start. And I honestly, like, I have so much information now that I feel paralyzed, and I would love to go to our CEO. We have 11 clubs. We have over 8,400 members in our clubs. We're connected to Boys and Girls Clubs of America, which is a huge organization nationally. We have screens in our clubs. We have video gaming systems. We have TVs. Most of our members, even 6-year-olds, have smartphones. We have policies in place to promote healthy lifestyles around food, drinks, and screen time. The impetus for creating those was around really reducing childhood obesity, but now there's, I realize, so much more, especially in terms of screen time. But I can see a future where we have no screens, where we really make the kids put their phones away, not just during program time. But I need someone to sell it to our CEO. I need to educate our parents to say that, like, you can call our front desk, you don't need to have, that's what they say. I need to call my kid, I need to be able to text them, we need to be able to communicate when they're at the club. And I just don't feel like I have the package of like consolidated stuff that I need to like start the battle. Like, I'm super grateful, but I'm also overwhelmed.
Well, keep in mind also, so that feeling, you know, I joked about there's urgency, that's why we're starting early. But you know what, with anything this important, you don't want to be frenetic about it, right? So this concept of Monday morning, you know what, make a plan sometime in the next week, set aside at least an hour to start strategizing. Or at least coming up with a game plan for when you're going to start doing things. Don't make yourself crazy thinking you have to change the world. Because that's one of the things we deal with. It's kind of frustrating. I'm sure you deal with it as well. Somebody's like, did you read what's in the news today? And every single day we see something new that makes us frustrated. And we're like, oh my gosh. It's like the fate of the world is depending on us and our members. What are we going to do? But you have to realize that it's going to be a long battle. Let me get Doug first, and then you, Josh.
I'm sorry, because I just want to bring this back to this network that we've created. Because, I want people to understand, we created this network a few months ago, and the first thing we did is we planned this conference. I mean, we created a resource bank, and we have some really fantastic resources on there. But we put, you know, this conference is about the majority of what we could do with this network in the last few months. And we are really looking to you to how we shape the future of this network. And I'm hearing a lot of things about how we can shape the future of this network. I'm hearing from you that you need a package to bring to the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club. And I don't know that we're going to create that, but I'm hearing from a lot of other people in our network that they've already created similar packages to bring to their school district, or they've created, you know, to address a different thing. And so what we want to do is to host those resources and to connect you people who are doing similar work, and so you can have that package. I heard from Sriram about the importance of having experts as spokespeople. We have a network of experts. So if you are hosting an event in Concord and you need an expert, we can connect you to an expert who can come and speak at your event or in Dearborn or wherever it is. And so that is the idea behind this network. It's not that CCFC is going to be providing all of this stuff, or that you need to create it for yourself if you're overwhelmed, but we need to hear what you need so that we can connect you with other people in the network who have similar ideas, who are interested in creating those things, or who have already created it, so we're not all reproducing the wheel in our own communities. That's the whole idea behind this network. So this is like, just hearing what you need is like, makes these 2 days worth it for me.
Can you collect it all so it'll be visible in one place?
Yeah, we have a resource bank. We have the Screen Time Action Network resource bank, and I'm hearing that one of the resources we need is how do I approach my, it may not be as specific as a Boys and Girls Club, but how do I approach my organization that works with children to convince them that we need to get the screens out of our
there was that one, and there was how do I talk directly to kids and make it exciting and fun for them, and one of them, and we're hearing a couple of them. Did you have something to say?
It's a question for the group that is the same thing. You know, as one of the so-called experts, what my expertise is doing research. Most researchers are not that good at talking to the public about, we're good at statistics and perhaps not much else. So I guess my question is, what is it you would want from people like me? Because you need the proof points. You can want everything. Like I started, everyone's got an opinion, and there are big money corporations out there fighting against all of the real data. I get death threats. I've been threatened to be sued by the video game industry. Lots of people trying to shut down the real science, and so it's hard. And of course, where do I get it out? I try to get it out through the media, who own the video game. So what is it you need from people like me? How could we be creating resources that then you can use in your talks, you can use as the proof points for whatever work you're doing?
Well, don't take
this lady and then this lady.
Yeah,
but I can't go everywhere.
Deb Mayer from Portland, Oregon, and also with Parents Across America, Oregon. One thing that really hasn't been discussed a lot, and piggybacking on what you just said about science and research, is the effects of Wi-Fi radiation on children. And it's come to the fore in Portland because we have a group of parents who want money from this bond that was passed, $790 million for safety in schools. They want some of that money dedicated to hardwiring computers instead of having Wi-Fi, because some parents are concerned about that. Just having that conversation, I find, is something that is very difficult to do, because if you have a concern about this, you are labeled as a tinfoil wearing, kind of crazy person. So I would like to see us have some kind of resources to address that. I think it's something that is too important to ignore. I have written about it on my website, and if anybody wants a card to connect with it, you can see that I talk about the precautionary principle, which is, if the science doesn't exactly prove it, but the effects may be devastating, it's something that you should at least talk about and address. So I'd like to put that on everybody's radar, and see if we can't make something that we at least start talking about.
Thank you. Yes, and then we'll just have one more question after that, because unfortunately we're out of time. Yes.
So I'm Jen Bailey. I run an early literacy program in Cambridge, which is across the river, and we're basically focused on parents 0 to 5 and really supporting them around talking, reading, playing, and singing with their kids. And so screen time is a huge topic for us, and we do lots of workshops for parents. And so Doug, what I need and what I wrote down and took from your thing was I feel like the science and the evidence in very simple ways, like what does it mean? Like once a year, here are the 6 main points with a slide that goes with it that's got, got the thing so that people that want to go find all the, really look it up. But most people really want the main points, most parents. And parents are struggling with this. They want help around it. They don't know what to do. They're, it's so hard. And so I think that will be really helpful.
You want a paper? You want videos?
I want it, videos, but I think short and sweet to the point. Like, the main points, not like every detail of it, but like, and I wrote them down. I mean, I'm going to use stuff you said because I wrote it down, but I think it's like every year having that, like what's changed? What do we now know? Because this is such an evolving field and we don't know a lot. I mean, I get asked for parents of, 2-year-olds about tablets. Well, it's not a lot of research at this point. It's evolving. So I can't keep up on that because I'm like I'm a practitioner. I'm doing my job. I can't, but so if there's a way that we can help through this network, be like, here's the latest research in a pretty simplified way that's sort of translated from research into kind of regular people stuff, and then people who want to know more can, there's a way to find it. Once a year would be really helpful.
We got the free stuff.
Sure. I actually, there's been a lot of conversation here that's been incredibly cool and super fertile. I'm so excited to just kind of see this come together. One thing, that I would just want to also mention and underscore, certainly in terms of what you guys need, that you know that best, and the field, but I would also encourage you to not also sell yourself short of the power that you do have. And absolutely, part of what we do is work with and mobilize experts, and that's absolutely essential. But the power of people is really potent as well. And just one example that I'll share to illustrate that is that through our work with parents, there was one woman, Bettina Siegel, who we had worked with and was actually running a blog. So that's another way that you can also get the word out, right? As newspapers and local sources of news, unfortunately, are not really doing that well, that we can build communities. But she actually, of her own accord, she had done some work with us, but saw that McDonald's was actually having this nutrition education film that they were pushing into schools. Actually, do you guys remember the name of this? I can't even...
60 days or...
something like that. Anyways, 600 meals. It was 600 meals, that's what it was. So it was like an anti-supersize me where basically a gym teacher who had a connection to McDonald's franchisee went on this diet, and basically what Bettina did is she saw this, she was completely enraged. She went through it and she picked apart, because she had been following this issue, and I'm sure you guys are all, as I'm just seeing here, there's so much wealth of knowledge that you each individually hold, but she picked apart all of the arguments that he was making, pointed out how this was really incredibly misleading, and worse, that it was coming with a school classroom education guide that was then being pushed out into schools, and he was going on a speaking tour. But she launched a petition on change.org, and it very quickly, in the space of a few weeks to a month, generated more than 80,000, 90,000 people that echoed that call. And TCFC and ourselves, we joined in, right? There's ways that kind of through the network you can build on and get more power. And ultimately, McDonald's responded and they stopped it. They cut off this nutrition education program. So just goes to show, like, absolutely we need to build the community, the relationships, the network, but also you have power and agency through your own networks, and absolutely don't undersell your own power as experts in your own right, in your own fields, as educators, as health professionals to make change, because I think that's ultimately like one of the most powerful things that we need to remember as a society, is that it's, Makita, I think as you said, it's us who define like what the rules of engagement should be. We shouldn't allow the corporations, because they already have a 5-year or 10-year business plan, and they're thinking out that far in terms of where they want to go. So let's take that back and think about that too.
On that note, we're out of time. Thank you.